Hello and welcome to the WPAOG podcast. This episode features an interview with Coach Mike Krzyzewski, a Naismith Hall of Fame coach, a 5-time national champion at Duke, and a 6-time gold medalist as head coach of the U.S. men's national team. He was also the West Point men's basketball head coach from 1975 to 1980. Coach K was initially reluctant to attend West Point, but eventually realized how much he loved the academy, the Army, and the importance of being exposed to so many different ways of leading. In his senior year, Mike was captain of West Point's basketball team. Following graduation, he served in the Army for 5 years before beginning his college coaching career. Mike believes that the education, training, and environment of West Point benefits people well beyond their time attending the academy. He uses the culture-based system of shared values as important for being a lifelong learner and leader, which has helped him coach and guide his players to become well-educated, strong, successful men both on and off the court. In this episode of On Point, Coach K talks about how he ensures that failure is not a destination, and how accountability helps people become the best version of themselves. He explains how his time at West Point and in the military informed and affected his approach to teaching and coaching. Mike provides insight into his career in college and the U.S. men's national team, along with the challenges and solutions for teaching the youth of today. He also describes the importance of communication and creating powerful and inspiring visions that have helped lead and motivate his teams. Now, please enjoy this interview between Coach Mike Krzyzewski and your host, General Bob Brown.
I'm General Retired Bob Brown, and I'm very honored to be able to host today's AOG podcast episode where we have really the greatest of all time, the winningest coach in NCAA basketball history. And quite honestly, with Coach K, I could spend the next 45 minutes talking about his accomplishments. But what we want to do is get into leadership and really take a look at your foundation there at West Point and et cetera. So I just would start saying thanks so much. I know me personally, I would never have been in the military if it wasn't for you. I was grateful that you thought I was a good enough player to recruit me and expose me to West Point, and I'm honored to have been able to serve 38 years joining a great team that all started with you way back when I was considering where to go to school. So, Coach, thanks for joining us. Congratulations on an amazing 47 years and the number of folks you've influenced. It's just unbelievably impressive. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Bob. And for all the listeners, you were a first-team All-State player out of Michigan, pretty good state for basketball players. And it was an honor to coach you. But more than an honor to coach you, the friendship that we developed, a lifelong friendship. And for our listeners to understand that Bob and I have been, throughout his military career, throughout my coaching career, we stay connected, talking about leadership, talking about teamwork. It's benefited both of us, and hopefully it's benefited the teams that we've had the honor to be leading.
It really has, Coach, just been incredible. All that I learned from you on the basketball court and so many others. But when I wanted to dig into a little bit, your start at West Point, and here you were a star player in Chicago, and Bob Knight shows up to recruit you. And I know, you weren't immediately thrilled with the idea of West Point, but can you take us through how that went? It must have been just fascinating.
Yeah, my grandparents, who I never knew, both sets came from Krakow in Poland. And so my mom never went to high school. She's a cleaning lady and great lady. And my dad only went to 2 years of high school. And I was an all-state guard in the inner city of Chicago. And I was considering Creighton and Wisconsin, probably my last two. And Coach Knight came in, and when he visited at not our home, but they call them a flat. It's like a big apartment in the inner city. Once he left, I was not that interested because I knew nothing about West Point. I wanted to dribble behind my back and shoot, and I did not look at the future. I was only looking at the present. My family said, you have to go. And I told Knight no. And now, put this in perspective, they verbally abused me and speaking in Polish and every day you got and obviously not abuse, but advice. And I said, I'll go, but it was mid-June.
Oh my gosh.
So
A couple of weeks before our date.
yes.
Yeah.
And Ray Murphy, former General Murphy and Coach Knight, they must have done some magic there to be able to get me. All I know was when I went through our day, I was not on any lists. I was penciled in.
Which may have been a good thing.
Well, that and my name were not good things.
Yeah.
on our day.
And this was 1965.
Yeah. So just all guys. Actually, when I coached there, this when they changed, and my wife has actually worked as like a walk-on during the practices with women going through. But Bob, for me, West Point has been the basis of everything I've done. And when that foundation was being formed, at that age, you fought it. You didn't understand it and whatever. And then all of a sudden you're in the military, which I loved really, but I wanted to coach. You say, oh, I understand. And an interesting thing, because you and I have studied leadership our entire lives, being exposed to the system of constant change in leadership in the cadet ranks formulated a base of, well, I like what that person does. I see how his personality changed. He was my buddy until he became the company commander. But you also saw how people managed, and it exposed you to so many ways of leading. It wasn't just the officers there. It was really kind of remarkable how that was put in place. I've always been amazed that happened.
That's a tremendous point, Coach. And, we learn more from bad leadership. I remember having a cadet leader early on who wasn't the greatest leader, and I learned a ton from that. You expect the good leadership. And so that constant change in the ranks, and that's what I wanted to dig into, so as a cadet, you talked about so much in lessons and leadership from West Point. And so that's one of the key lessons you learned is looking at different leadership styles and learning from that. And what were some of the other, as a cadet at West Point and at that, especially that time, leadership lessons you pulled out that helped with a foundation you would leverage later?
Well, I came from a really good family that believed in what I think are the right things, the dignity of work and all that. But being in the environment of West Point, I learned what a culture, value-based environment, a culture based on value stands the test of time. It's great during good times, but you know what? It's even better during the tough times. And so what I've learned is whether the unit, I was an artillery officer, whether the unit I was in or the teams, whether it be West Point teams, Duke teams, or I was an 11-year coach for the U.S. team, I've always tried to create a good culture and based on values. And you helped me immensely. Remember when we had that, like the Army values? And so really, I think they're very similar. Ours has been, integrity, courage, respect, selfless service, duty, trust, loyalty. Those were our 7. They weren't shoved down your throat as a cadet. You lived them every day. A lot of times I'll bring up when I do a speech or whatever, I said, imagine an environment like, we have 4 regiments at West Point. I'm in the 3rd regiment. I meet a person from the 4th regiment. I don't know who he is or she is. And they say something, and I believe them. I believe them in an instant because we have a shared value system. Imagine if you could do that in your company, in your business, in your family.
Not the norm. It's interesting, Coach. When you bring that up, you think, well, that's normal. Every organization, the ones that do have a culture based on values stand out, and you can see it and feel it. Every team you ever coach, you could feel it, that culture based on values at all different levels.
And in the military, obviously it can be life or death. And so in sport, we talk about it being life, but it's not. There is pressure and all that. But you need to know the truth in that moment. Not, you have to have the courage to say or do what needs to be said or done in the moment it needs to be said or done. And really, that's what the academy was all about and still is about.
Yeah. Well, that's such a tremendous point. And, when you're going through it, you don't really see, but as the longer you're away from it, you realize what it taught. And that's just tremendous. How about on the basketball court with Bobby Knight? And, I know how tough he was. And, when you look, and you were the leader of the team, the captain of the team in 69, but the leader of the team your whole time there, really. And what did that combined with as a cadet, what lessons did you pull from that you would leverage?
Playing for him was tough, but I learned so much, mostly about great things, about preparation, especially emotion at the highest level, the fact that you better come to work and do your best every day, very demanding. And I feel like I was so lucky, although I didn't think of it at that time being lucky. I went to the best leadership school in the world, the United States Military Academy, and I played for one of the greatest coaches of all time. You taught a double shot of excellence. And so that combination of things, although at times I struggled with it, really gave me an amazing basis of knowledge of the game. And I was the point guard. The old saying, the commander is responsible, the captain's responsible, the point guard's responsible for getting you into the offense, the defense, the out of bounds situation that you needed to be in. And so I learned that level of responsibility on and off the court. And in my career, then look, that no one has had that level of foundation in my sport. I'm not saying no one has been better than me or whatever, but no one has had that. And I recognize it. And for all of our graduates, don't take for granted what you think is normal. It's not normal. We're so damn lucky. And I will say this too about the military that I was in at that time has only gotten better. Right now, the best team in the world is the United States Army.
Coach, that's so incredible to hear you say that, and I agree completely. But it is when you mentioned the best leadership school and the greatest coach that you had. I had the same thing. I had to, unbelievable. So fortunate. The best leadership school and the greatest coach, and you don't realize it when you're going through it. I do remember sometimes, we sort of go back and forth, and boy, you see it later how much you learned, and that team aspect that you mentioned in the Army. As you worked that and all the teams you coached and brilliantly always, as I look at the Olympic team as one of the greatest examples, because people thought, boy, that is a tough group. These are multimillionaires, NBA super. How can you build that culture? How can you get them? But you did it. Taking that from the lessons you just talked from West Point, you can see that foundation. How did you, as you were looking at that you will go back and look at those lessons?
Well, culture, it has to be worked on all the time. When I took over the U.S. team, I was the first national coach. They used to it's kind of like the military. During my time, it trained as a unit, but didn't go into combat as a unit. It's a huge mistake. And so with the U.S. team, there wasn't a culture. I can remember the first meeting I had with LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Chris Paul, Carmelo, all these guys. Jerry Colangelo, who was the chair of USA Basketball, spoke to the team, and then he said one thing that I don't believe in. It's probably the only thing he said that I don't believe in. But he told them, it's an honor to have you. Leave your egos at the door. And when I got up, I said, look, LeBron, Kobe, you guys, bring your ego in. Like, we'll get all your egos under one USA ego, but the Gasols, the Ginobilis, the Argentina, they're going to have big egos. And then, Bob, we always had a picture of the gold medal on a big screen. So I'm talking to them, and I had individual meetings with 4 of them. I always have an individual meeting before a team meeting. So I want to know that there's a friend in the room. So I had individual meetings with LeBron, Kobe, Dwayne Wade, and Jason Kidd. And I told them we were gonna have a meeting on how we were gonna live together. And they said, "What?" And I said, "No, we're gonna have a meeting on how we're gonna live together. We're gonna have standards, not rules. Okay, we're gonna own it." So I said, my 2, and then we can add to it, is we always look each other in the eye when we talk. And the second one, we always tell each other the truth. So anyway, the meeting starts, and the very first thing I tell them, I said, "I want you to know you are not playing for the United States." And, they look at me, "We shouldn't have a college coach. Where's the pro coach? This guy's an idiot." And I paused and I said, "We will not win that gold medal unless we are United States basketball. You can't play for United States. You have to be it. And we have to figure out what it means to be it." We had the standards meeting and we came up with 15 standards. But I told them, later tonight when you go up to your suites, we practice in Las Vegas, and we had their uniforms laid out on their beds. I told them, go up and look on your beds, and for at least a minute, be 16. I want you to look and close your eyes. I wanted them to feel. So later that night, I'm losing on a video poker machine, and I get a tap on it's a true story. This is not embellished in any way. It's Kobe Bryant. And Kobe and I recruited him in high school and all that. And he said, "Coach, I just want you to know I did that." And I started crying. I get chills thinking about it right now. And then what we did, just so all our graduates understand, in order to build our culture, it's that Jerry and I talked, and I said, we need to get the Army in here. We need to teach selfless service. And you, as a colonel then, brought 3 of your wounded warriors in and talked about, that was the very first outside group. You saw how many of the guys started crying, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was unbelievable. You were again, this culture based on values, and you're building it and developing it with it. That's amazing.
Yeah. And we did
and the
that
timeline you
throughout.
have too.
And we
Yeah.
always used the military to accentuate that, for even if it was just to go to Arlington Cemetery and feel go to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and do a scrimmage at a base or a post. And I can remember Marty Dempsey, we were doing something in DC, and before the game, we had our team line up, and he had men and women in the military take their dog tags and put them over the necks of our team. Things like that are so emotional.
Maya Angelou, people won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. You're a master at that. Your passion for leadership, your ability to understand people and get them to feel. And how did you develop that? Was that early on? You learned that from the experiences at West Point on the court. It just seems a lot of folks will have strengths, but yours continues to grow in that area.
If you're a leader, you're a lifelong learner. Okay, I'm going to college. I'm going to do engineering, history, law, or whatever. The West Point degree is a degree on leadership. You're always learning, because one of the constants in leadership is who you're leading, and who you're leading keeps changing as time goes by. I'm 75. This year, Bob, I had 2 kids start for me who were 18. I'm 57 years older. What I learned throughout was, how do I get this group to feel what I feel, okay, and own it? But I constantly changed how I communicated. I did not change what I communicated, the values. They stayed the same, but it's up to the leader, instead of saying, well, that's the way it used to be. No, all right, you're an idiot. It's always used to be.
Well, it takes a humility in leadership to admit you don't know everything. But, there's some folks, they feel the leadership model. In fact, when you were at West Point, I was at West Point, the leadership model was a little bit, look, you can't admit you don't know everything. That's showing a weakness, and now we realize, no, it takes much more confident leader to stand up in front of a group and say, hey, I don't have all the answers. We need everybody here. You did just a brilliant job of involving everybody, having the humility to know you didn't have all the answers, but yet the confidence to know that your system, that culture you created was right. That's unbelievable.
Well, Bob, I think playing sports helped in that regard. And that's why one of the great things about the academy is the statement, every cadet an athlete, because you learn on the field, on the court, in the ring, wherever you're at. And, the ability to understand what you know and don't know, but surround yourself with people who know. Okay, I'm a artillery officer, and I'm an exec at 1st to the 19th Artillery at Fort Carson. We got these 155 self-propelled howitzers. All right, I don't know that much about them, but you know who knows about them? My E6 chief of smoke. And so I meet with him, and I said, I just want you to know, I know that you know more than me. And I'm going to lead this group, and I want you to be you, and I want you to tell me and teach me. And if you think I'm going in the wrong direction, it's okay to step in. And I tell cadets all the time, those E6s, E7s, E8s, and you better go down on one knee to the E9s. They are as good a professionals as there are in any profession. And they take pride in helping that second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain.
And it gets right to your point of the greatest team in the world because of these professional non-commissioned officers that are amazing and their dedication. And when you look at current events, tragically, what's going on in Ukraine, Russia doesn't have that. And you see that. They're missing that. That's unique. United States Army, few other armies close, but none like us. That's a great point. But that balance there, very interesting. Same you would use with the Olympic team or with Duke, or that humility to know that you don't have all the answers, but yet understanding what you're doing is right. And it's interesting that a lot of folks, when they experience failure, will possibly go away from that culture and the values. What pulls them away. It hardened you when you had setbacks. You rededicated to the culture.
Yeah, but we learned that at the academy. I mean, you fail hundreds of times during your 4 years, not necessarily a course, although we always have to watch your grades.
Yeah, no doubt. I was on the dean's other list, no doubt about
close
it.
All the time.
Yeah, close all the time. Not as bad as Marty Coyne, who was almost the GOAT, but certainly not on the dean's list.
No, but part of the academy was failure was not your destination. In other words, when you got knocked down, you get up, and don't always get up alone. Be on a team that will make you better. And look, part of the journey to be outstanding, and again, I have to do with a different team every year, is having setbacks. Setbacks are opportunities to get better. And there are 4 things that I look at all the time. I didn't do this my whole life. That doesn't mean, like, when something bad happens, you don't put your head down and say, why me? But you don't stay there. The very first thing is attitude. It's on you to have a great attitude. No one's stopping you from having a great attitude. The second thing is belief. Not just belief in you, but belief in your unit that we can figure this out. The third thing is prep. What did you learn from what just happened? How can we change that? And then the fourth is the best, execution. And so you turn whatever has been bad, learn from it, and then the more you get accustomed to that, then when something bad hits, you say, we got it. We can take care of that.
Early on, when you were coaching at Duke, you had a terrible loss. Could you tell that story? What your assistants kind of wanted to forget it? Could you?
Well, it was actually at the end of the season, my 3rd year, and we've won the most, and we've won incredible amount of games and championship. But my first 3 years at Duke were 38 and 47. A lot of people wanted me fired. And we had just lost, I think it was 109 to 67 or 65 to Virginia and Ralph Sampson in the tournament, ACC, and our season was over. And we went to our staff and some support staff went to a little restaurant and you're getting something to eat. And one of the support staffs raised a glass of iced tea or a water and said, "Here's to forgetting about tonight." I pushed his hand down and I put my drink up and I said, "Here's to never forgetting. This is never going to happen again." And we turned it around and we won 24 games the next year and probably averaged about 30 wins a year since then.
What a tremendous lesson for leadership. You're going to fail. And as you said, that attitude, belief, prep, and execution, learning from it. I do worry today their younger generation is more afraid of failure than ever before. And I think it's because when you and I were younger, Coach, you could fail and kind of keep it isolated and learn from it. And now, of course, it spreads everywhere. And people, social media and everything else, and it makes, and as we know, if you're not failing, you're not doing anything, and you've got to learn from that failure. So, have you seen that in the changing generation that they're a little more afraid to fail?
Yeah, well, our educational system has changed, and it's changed a lot during COVID, where youngsters are not held accountable. Their excuses made, well, it's the teacher's fault, and parents, many parents adhere to that.
It's almost tough today not to, and it's the exception when you see a parent that doesn't.
But we usually have good parents, especially our guys are really like they're stars in high school. So I call it holding them accountable. And somebody says, "Well, did you yell?" Well, it just depends. I used to yell at you.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah. But that was the way you communicated then.
Yeah. It worked, I'll say. Yeah, very well.
That wouldn't work as much now. It doesn't mean you never yell. And so you have to get it across. But holding people accountable. I just spoke to the Corps cadets a month ago. One of the things I told them was, you are armed better than anybody because you've just gone through, especially there were 2 weeks before graduation. On graduation day, we're going to have 1,000 leaders of character, an infusion in the Army. And you being held accountable for 4 years, you are ahead of your peers by so much. You need to be able to teach your units that holding accountable is not bad. Holding accountable is the only way we become the best. And you know what? You're going to be in an arena at some time. The best is going to win. You have to train to be the best. And that's that value, the value-based and the accountability. To me, West Point is more important now than at any time in the history of our country.
That's a great point. With everything, the divide and everything going on, that those leaders of character, boy, so critical.
The thirst for power in the political ranks instead of thirst for service of the people that they have the honor to lead.
Yeah, no question. And I think something even a lot of our listeners that have West Point and military background may not know is your incredible support for the military, because you're so humble, you don't want to talk about, but it is unbelievable the amount. I can just say that, from your relationship and the award, the Coach K Award at West Point that's given out, that's all about character and integrity. And then going out across the force and talking. I know every time I deployed, Coach, you would get a hold of Patty, my wife, and what do they need, and it was unbelievable. Just as busy as you were, and you did that for so many units and helped them so much with leadership and just a love for the military, as you mentioned earlier, understanding the great teams.
I get, and it's an honor to get a lot of requests, and that sometimes you can't do them, but this is a fun thing. I've done double figures videos for balls. Like the unit has a ball, and would you do the video or would you do something? And all of a sudden you're with the 75th and the Ranger Battalion or whatever. And I've loved doing those.
Oh, they have a huge impact, an absolutely huge impact. Your impact on so many because of your just tremendous leadership. I know this year you saw it, and as people, but you never really see the total. It's unbelievable. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, it's made me. Look, we're all West Point graduates. We all are the same in that we were brought up in a value-based culture, but we all took an oath, and we took an oath for a lifetime of service to our country, whether military or civilian. And that's the thing that makes us all the same. And so when I get a request for that, when I can do it,
we are grateful. I know Coach earned the prestigious George Marshall Award given by Association of the United States Army for service to the nation, and it's one of the most. But there's no way we could say thank you enough to you for that, and the impact is just huge on units in harm's way. I want another thing that just has been amazing, looking at your leadership over the years, that I don't think a lot of leaders get right, Coach, is the balance as a leader between kind of fundamental things that, goes back to that culture we were talking about, but then also innovative new ideas. And there's a balance there. And I, with a unique perspective, I could watch a Duke practice and see the same zigzag defensive stance drill that we all hated. And you're doing that on the one hand here 40 years later, but then you're doing something incredibly innovative that you learned as a lifelong learner when you were coaching the USA team, for example, is fast break technique, whatever. How's that balance between the fundamentals and innovative new ideas? It just seems key that you did that so well over the years and continued to maintain the fundamentals, but grow, and your teams grew, and your success. You can definitely look and trace it back to that ability.
You bring up a really incredible point about teaching. And I think a leader is also a teacher. Like you teach, you don't just lead in what you teach. And so you learn how to teach, and some of the compulsories that you do. It's like figure skating. Before you can actually compete, you got to do all the individual stuff, and then you can do your triple twists and flips and all that. And so as you're teaching those, you start picking up on things that they lead easier or better to doing those other innovative things. And a huge thing that I learned, and I've had an opportunity to coach the greatest players in the world and some of the greatest players in the history of college basketball. When I got that level of player, I learned how to coach. I learned how to lead better. I always coached my best player or two the hardest. Later in my career, I spent time with the player that you could only teach so much, and then you have to let them have their instincts. With those really outstanding players, I would talk to them about visualization, about meditation, and where they would visualize themselves in moments of pressure or whatever, and not necessarily running a play, but making a play. And we would spend time with that. And the guy that I coached who was the best at that at the U.S. level was Kobe. Kobe literally did that. And I learned more. Coaching Steph, you watch these individual technique, and what they show, on videos and that isn't necessarily what they do privately. And these little techniques of getting that really star to not just conform to the norm. So I think that's a key part of leadership. If you have great talent in one or two people, don't make them conform to a lower standard.
There's so much in what you just described, Coach, leadership, that you did so incredibly well. The visualization, it's interesting, I think it's a huge advantage athletes have in leadership is when we were kids, out there playing in our driveway or on the playground. You're visualizing, for me back, Jerry West, whoever, and and you're going through this, and you're seeing it, and you're visualizing. And it's interesting in leadership. In the Army, for example, every manual says visualize, but we really don't teach how to visualize.
Yeah, a key word in that is imagination. You as a leader, you can imagine, but if you have somebody younger, more talented, what are you imagining? Like, I would talk to my guys about that. Or why don't you imagine? Put yourself out there. And when you do, and I think this is key, don't be afraid to fail. I'm with you. You follow your instincts. In other words, we're running a play. If you see something different, you make a read. I call it run in motion offense. Go for it. Now, not everybody I want going for it like that. Otherwise, we can have chaos. Make the read, and sometimes in making the read, you have to verbalize something before making it. In other words, you see something, you see it, you're on the court, I'm on the bench, you see it, and if I said that, it'll set the environment for me to do that thing.
Right. Which goes back to, it's an empowerment that's required. But I go back to, it requires that humility as a leader to know. You see, some coaches don't empower, leaders don't empower like that. They don't trust, they haven't built that culture, and they're afraid to empower like that. And therefore, the player will never reach their potential.
You keep saying humility. I think it's just being smart. Like, you want to win.
Well, I was kind of stuck on, I still, Marty Dempsey talks, humility with confidence. But you're right, it's being smart. I see so many leaders, Coach, that they're afraid to talk. All that you just talked, they put it in the touchy-feely category, just get out there and play, and they have to have all the answers, and they'll never reach their potential. Their team will never reach it. Their organization will never reach it. They will never. So if it's being smart about it, you have to be smart enough to have that humility to know that you don't have all the answers. And empowerment today is more important than ever. We've seen that change in sports and in the world because of the connectivity, globalization, just how fast things move today. You mentioned social media earlier and the speed of information. And so that empowerment is so key. And boy, you did that so well. It just sets you apart.
Another thing with all this, Bob, is how do you get your message across? So a thing that I've really learned, like midway through my career, was having more than one voice. Like a leader, it doesn't have to be the leader's voice all the time. You can get tired. In our culture with youngsters today, their attention span is not great, and they have to be shown things. And so if I had, say, 20 minutes of stuff to go through with the team, I might do it in 2 10-minute segments and even change locations. John Shire, who's the new head coach, was my associate. I said, John, you take it, and I'll sit in the back. And while he's saying it, I might make a point. They have to turn. How do you feed your team?
Again, this understanding of people is so important, and just smart in getting that across, and how you do that. And I do remember about midway through your career when you realized, we were talking leadership, and you realized, gosh, we cannot communicate the same way with players. You were continuing, as I had done in leadership, to communicate the way I always had, and it wasn't reaching the younger generation to communicate differently. I at first thought, when they wouldn't look you in the eye, for example, they didn't trust you. No, it's just the different way of communicating. And suddenly you had to leverage things like texts and blogs and get them to open up. As a leader, if you don't stay up to the different methods, if you're stuck in your ways and you're not a lifelong learner, boy, you're not going to relate as well to those you're leading. And it really has changed over time. And what challenges have you faced with that, Coach?
Yeah, well, I think the challenge of change, that expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, that's ridiculous. Change doesn't mean that it's broken. Change means you don't have a rigid system. You have an agile system that is continue. It's like silly putty or something. You're constantly molding it. And to recognize that a key component to that is the communication aspect of it. So if a kid is uncomfortable with looking in the eye, well, one, we start recruiting a youngster and teaching that in the recruitment. I tell my guys all the time, from the start to the finish, I'm going to tell you the truth. Wouldn't you want to hear the truth? I'll tell them, I said, boy, the outfit you're wearing is great. Your shoes are unbelievable. Your haircut sucks. And I said, and we start laughing. I said, but by the way, your haircut does suck. You tell me the truth all the time, too. Communication is not one way. And leaders, as much as you talk, you should listen probably more. With your staff, that's a way of developing communication. But how do you develop the individual communication with a person you're leading? And for me, a young person. And so to me, you have to ask them questions. We use humor a lot. I use self-effacing humor quite a bit. And it's up to you to break the ice. I always kept a small office on the locker room level. And in between our little conference room for coaches and our coaches' locker room and the players' locker room, there's a little kitchen, a place where 5 or 6 people could, and we always had health foods there 24 hours a day. And I would impromptu meetings with my team. I'd be working out, I'd be in my athletic gear. I would not be a statue, or I would not be General Brown. I would be, no, or Coach K. I'd be the guy who's here. And you'd start talking, or I'd say, Wendell, come on in here. Let's go in the conference room. Like, how the hell is it going? What do you think? Yesterday's practice wasn't real good. Or, man, can you help AJ? He's having some problem. And so a huge thing is you don't have to solve all the problems. The messenger of the solution doesn't have to be you. And I tried to work through my players to help other players.
At the same time, you're showing them how much you care by relating to them and caring about them and showing them. The tendency would be to solve all the problems. Yeah.
It's empowerment, but it's not. Whenever you talk to somebody, it doesn't mean you're just talking about them. Or you ask a freshman, what do you think? What do you mean, coach? No, what do you think? How do you feel? How do you feel? Tell me what you feel. Really? Yeah. I have loved that. Whereas when I coached you in the late 70s, early 80s, I didn't coach in the 80s. And how you communicated like that was so much different.
So different, yeah. All face-to-face. And now, how did you deal with this? It's something I know a lot of people, the social media challenges on your players. How did you, again, and probably engaging them a lot and talking about not ignoring it, but that must have been a challenge.
Well, it still is. And even though I'm retired, I still communicate with them. And what do they look at the most? They look at their phones the most. I followed each one of my players, recruits, and on Instagram and Twitter. We have a group text just with the players. Obviously, I text a lot. It might be 11 o'clock at night. I'm looking at Twitter or Instagram, and I see something that I think our team would benefit from. Boom, I send it out right then.
Wow, that's, what an adjustment over time when you look at that's tremendous, yeah.
Youngsters today like to show everybody what they're doing. So when they show something that's really good, then I'll individually text. I'd say, Wendell, give me a call. I just saw your Instagram. And so I'm calling, and I say, man, that was really good. Or why did you put that out? And they said, well, I said, that wasn't a smart thing to do. Okay, so that's part of it. The other part, and there are many parts, we have the top social media in college sports. Football, basketball. We started it 16 years ago. The guy that I have running it, we have a group of 5 people doing social media. So here's the thing. We play a game and we win. Those kids after a ball game, not while I'm talking to them, but they're looking at their comments. And now everyone's saying, you're terrific, you're this. You lose, and not everyone, but a lot of people are saying, you suck, you're whatever. So we actually have media sessions where we teach social media. And a concept that we've tried to teach is one voice. There are many voices out there. We need to have a program voice, not parents, not AAU coaches, not friends. You can have a voice with them about other things, but not about what we're doing.
So innovative, difficult problem, and how you adapted to handle that. That's just brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you're completely successful, because you have to understand these kids are addicted. They're addicted to the phone.
And it's going to impact their fear of failure and everything else.
And also because in my guys, they want notoriety. The more followers you have, actually, it even monetizes itself now because of the new thing of name, image, and likeness. No, where you can make money. It's legal. In other words, there are other external forces that are now part of what you have to think about in my profession, but also in life. You have to constantly adjust to this.
Boy, that's such a tough challenge, and it's so impressive how you handle that. Another key when you look at communicating is you just do a fantastic job of leveraging some really powerful images. I'll have soldiers that worked for me 35 years ago that was, "Hey, sir, I remember the fist. I remember the fist." And I remember when you won, became the winningest coach of all time, and they wanted comments from people, and they came around, and hundreds of athletes, and it was interesting. I thought, hey, I'll use the fist. I'll be real creative. Well, about 90% of the guys all were just tremendous. How did you, again, just over time as you learn that, and you see it, it's just so innovative, and it builds on an empowerment we were talking about.
Right.
Helps them visualize.
Yeah, it becomes part of your culture. Like, for me, it was basketball, and you have 5 fingers, and there are 5 guys on the court. No matter how good you are, if you punch with only 2 of them, you might hurt somebody. You're going to hurt yourself too. You're never going to have full potential of your team unless you form a fist. And it was based on five values, really. Communication, you look each other in the eye. Trust, you tell each other the truth. Collective responsibility, we win and we lose together. Care, I got your back. Don't be afraid. I don't even look back. I got your back. And then pride, you want to be a part of something that's bigger than you. Really, how can you argue those things?
Well, there's not a team of any type that wouldn't benefit, and those 5 things don't apply. They're key.
Right. Family teams, business teams, sports teams, military
I
teams.
tell you, I used it in combat, building the team, and the power of that. Every one of those that you hit there, the trust, and oh my gosh, they're all so critical. So yeah, that's powerful and an innovative way to communicate.
What we did too, Bob, with most of our team, like when we're in a huddle and we break, we don't put our hands in, we put our fists in. My last team, we had a great year. We lost in the Final Four. We won our regular season. We won the Western region, but we lost my last home game to our arch rival, Carolina, and it was almost too big, and they're very good. We had a hard time recovering from that. We went to the ACC tournament. We won a couple games, but we mucked through them. Then we lost in the championship. And in shepherding them during that, everyone said, well, you can't do it. And so in the military, there are different mottos or different sayings. And that practice before we started the NCAA tournament, I said, you know what? We can, we will. You understand? We can, we will. And so at every huddle, every team, it became our mantra. We can, we will. And we won some incredible games in the tournament after being a little bit dead in the water. You know what I mean?
The difference clearly. I knew you did something like that. I said, you've got them like the basketball technique you used in 2015 when you won the championship, and the put on the ball, right on the ball, who you're playing for. I knew you did something. You could see it. You could feel it.
And it was that thing. We can, we will. And really a guy who was a good player for us. He started and came off the bench, Jeremy Roach, in our Michigan State game, Texas Tech, Arkansas. These are teams that are really good. In the last 5 minutes of the game, he could and we did, Uh, but it wasn't. I mean, we all played well, but somehow it wasn't the star that emerged. It was a guy who became a star during that time by being in that environment, the we environment. We can, we will.
Absolutely unbelievable. Coach, we are so grateful for your incredible leadership and example. Selfless service has just absolutely been so impressive over the years. And I know there's so many fans out there. Nothing, Duke is one of the greatest schools in the world, but they're not fans because of Duke. They're fans because of you. Boy, we're going to miss you. We're glad you're staying around as an ambassador and staying involved. But I know personally, it's going to be hard for me to even watch. I've only known college basketball with you in it, so it's going to be so hard to even watch it in the future here. But we are just so proud, and no question, every graduate is proud of you and the incredible contributions you've made to our nation. So many, and I didn't even bring up a whole bunch more that you do. Everything from the Jimmy V Foundation, the Center in Honor of Your Mom, Emily Krzyzewski Center, and Children's Miracle Network, and Duke Children's Hospital. So many things behind the scene that, again, a lot of people don't see because your humility, and you don't do it for that reason. But we're just grateful to you. Really enjoyed this. I could keep listening for forever to you, and I'm grateful personally. I would have never had the experience and been on the greatest team in the world, as you mentioned earlier, in the Army, without your leadership and recruiting me, and then all I learned from you. I always say I learned more on the basketball court than anywhere else at West Point. And West Point, as you mentioned, is the greatest leadership school in the world. But I was fortunate enough to have you as a leader, and so learned a lot more there even. So, Coach, thanks. It's wonderful. And we hope you get some time to relax.
This was great. You learn from being in situations like this. And, since the end of the season, I've gotten thousands of letters and notes and just people that you've called over the years. Let me tell you one quick funny story. I get an email from a lawyer, and my secretary brings in and said, it's with a bunch of emails. It said, but this guy sent a letter from his 92-year-old mother, picture of her, and said, would you please, Coach has to see my mom's letter. I look at the letter and I tell Jerry, my assistant, I said, find out. And the lady's name is Marge. She lives near Poughkeepsie.
Oh my gosh, right up the river.
So I get Marge's number and I call her. And I said, Marge. And she said, yes. I said, this is Coach K. And she says, is this a trick?
Understandable. Yeah.
She's great. And the letter is so beautiful and well written. So I said, Marge, this is not a trick. I'm looking at your picture and I've just read your letter. And I want to thank you. Your letter made me feel good. And then she says, Coach, you've made me feel better for 40 years. And I crumbled, and we talked for about 10 minutes. And there's so many good people out there.
That is so cool. That's what makes you special, though.
Well, it made me feel good. Part of doing this is to make sure you keep doing things with good people. But I've enjoyed it. You've been saying how proud you are of me. Look, I've never been in combat. I've been on a court and trained with units and whatever. But you have led units. You have led remarkable men and women in the service of our country. And the job you're in right now, we talked last night in preparation for this, and I told my staff and my family, what you said. You said, Coach, I can help our soldiers even more now. It made me cry, really.
Oh, geez. Oh, it's my honor.
That's the service that so many, hopefully all of our graduates feel. I tell a player, and Battier did this the best, if you come every day to practice to make everybody better, that would be the best. That's what you got. That's what you've been doing. And
Well, it's just an incredible honor to have learned from you, played from you, to just unbelievable, and to be a friend is just such an honor and so much. And so thank you so much, Coach. It's my honor to serve, and I learned that from you and the selfless service and from West Point and everything else, and I'm just grateful to have that opportunity. So thanks so much for joining us today. It's wonderful, and please, I guess the good news is you don't have to go out recruiting, right? And so hopefully you get a lot of family time and enjoying your new puppy and this wonderful spoiling those grandkids. So thanks, Coach. Great to see you. Look forward to seeing you soon. And please give our best to the whole K team. They're an amazing group, and it was a family affair and a family love affair there throughout your whole career, which is so neat to see. So
all right,
yeah, thanks, Coach.
This has been a production of the WPAOG Broadcast Network. Please take a moment to rate and review the show and join us each week for a new episode. Thank you for listening.